Hi y'all. If you are a returning viewer, welcome back. If you are new, welcome. My name is Amira and my channel is all about trying new makeup, talking about new makeup, but also finding new and exciting ways to be inspired by the makeup you already own. If that sounds good to you, I hope you will consider subscribing, and if you enjoyed today's video, hitting the like button. So today, guys, I'm kind of continuing my little series here that I started inadvertently, where I talk about makeup products and makeup brands that have disappointed me or that I've lost interest in. And today I want to talk about specific products that I feel like I wasted my money on. Let's get into it. I've got my little list here, guys, and let me just say, I mean, I feel like that's a pretty long list. So let's talk about these first three products because I've talked about them recently. I've talked about one of these ad nauseum, the other one semi ad nauseum, and I kind of just want to put it out there. I'm going to say these were a waste of my money. So first up is the McGrath Blush Duo. I purchased the Blush Duo. I believe it's called Paradise Glow. I decluttered it like a month later, maybe 2 months later after purchasing it. I love the Pat McGrath single blush formula. I love it. It's one that I rave about. I recommend it to people, and I was expecting to love the blush duos just as much. I do not. I think the formula is not as good as the single blushes, and I think that, you know, the one that I had was a repeat shade without being told that it was a repeat shade. It was a repeat shade of a single blush of hers that I already own. So it was, not only was it a waste of money in the sense of like I really repurchased, so I purchased something I already owned and didn't know that when I purchased it, and also the formula just didn't live up to her normal quality, in my opinion, or the price point. I think the blush duos are like $44, something like that. That's expensive, and so it's expensive for a product that I had for 2 months, and that I at that point was just like, I don't need this in my collection anymore. Like 2 months in, I was like, yeah, I'm done. Waste of money. There's another product that I recently decluttered and that I've talked about, and I felt like my opinion was unpopular. However, after having given my unpopular opinion, a lot of people slid into my comments and were like, actually, girl, I feel the exact same way. I just don't want to say it. Patrick Ta Major Dimension 2 Rose Palette. Waste of money for me. Let me start off by saying that I know a lot of people love that palette. I personally didn't. I found the tones to be too similar, and that's sort of the risk you run when you're doing a palette that is all one tone and all one kind of color family, the same color family, is that once you start applying them to your eyes and blending them out, they just kind of all blend together, and you're not going to get a lot of versatility from the palette. No matter how you use the shades, the looks will almost always be samey. You know what I mean? And I also found that the metallics were very thin. I was expecting something a little bit more bodied. They felt like toppers to me. And the cream formulation, which is what I was actually the most excited about because I love cream eyeshadows and liquid eyeshadows, I found it to be a very wet formula. I applied them and I was waiting for them to dry down so that I could apply things over them, and I just felt like they never dried down. I feel like they continue to just be creamy and wet on my eyelid. And maybe that's just how my eyelids and that palette play together. They don't get along. You know, someone else's experience might be different, but for me, they just never set, and that's a problem because I tend to like to either use cream shadows on their own or use cream shadows as bases and apply powder shadows over them, and I couldn't do that with those at all. Like, they creased on my eyelid on their own, and then I couldn't apply anything powder over them. Additionally, I had some major irritation from that palette, and I don't know, I've had this with other pinky tone palettes, so it could just be the shades, that could be one of the dyes that's used in, you know, rosy tone palettes. But for me, that kind of scared me off because I had just spent $65 on a palette that not only was I not excited by the formulation, but when I wear the eyeshadows, my eyes are irritated and I can't wear eyeshadow for 2 or 3 days after. It just kind of, it was just all around a no. All around a no for me. I have decluttered it. It has gone to another home where it is being loved and worn happily, but it no longer resides with me. Another palette fail, and this one is probably, I'm going to do a ranking of every product that I've tried, every new product that I've tried this year towards the end of the year. And this one is probably going to be Well, it's definitely going to be on the list, but it's going to be like pretty high on the list as far as, or low on the list, if I put it that way. It's going to be pretty low on the list because we'll do a ranking. This one's going to be pretty low on the list, and this is the Artist Couture Supreme Moss palette. Another palette that I purchased around the same time that I purchased the Patrick Ta. That whole like palette purchase time in my life was a big fail. Like I hadn't purchased palettes in months because I was on a 3-month no buy. I come off my no buy. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna get this one and this one, and both of them were complete fails for me. So that's a bit sad face. But I would say that if I had to choose between the two, even though the Patrick Ta gives me eye irritation, at least I feel like it's a functional palette and I can get use out of all of the shades. I cannot say the same for Supreme Moss. The metallics give you hard pan. The mattes are really thin, and the color story is great. I think it's actually a better color story overall than the Patrick Ta because you get a bit more dimension and you get a bit more, you can play a little bit more in tone and depth and dimension. But the formulation across the board is just not the biz, and which is really sad to say because the Artist Couture Supreme Nudes is one of my favorite neutral palettes, and I recommend it to folks. I think it's a fantastic palette. I think it's a great formulation. I don't know what happened with that palette, and it's a palette that it's kind of interesting looking back how I feel like it kind of they dropped it out of nowhere. There was really no promo leading up to it, and it kind of quietly like just kind of left, and I'm just wondering like, was that just like you guys had some palettes that you made and there was a fail, but you didn't want to have to write it off at the end of the year, so you just released? I have questions. MAC Fancy Feast palette, and I know that's not the name of it. That's not the name of it. That's what I call it. I call it the Fancy Feast palette. It's like Feast something. I'll try and remember to put a picture up so you can see what I'm talking about. I reviewed it. It was one of the first, if not the first, one of the first palettes I ever reviewed on my channel, and I was so disappointed in this palette. It's my fault though. I don't blame MAC. I blame me. I looked at that palette and I looked at the aesthetic of it, and it was so my aesthetic. It was just hitting all of the. It was just hitting all the chords, you know, pushing all the buttons, and I was like, ooh, ooh. And I knew in my rational mind was like, Amira, girl, you really think that palette is gonna be the biz? You really? But I went la 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 la, and I purchased it anyway, and I tried it out on camera, and I was like, it's okay. And then I tried it again, and I was like, it's not okay. You know how you like want to be positive, and then you're like, you know, actually no, it's not okay. MAC is still pretty pricey. You know, I think the price of that MAC palette was the same as the Artist Couture palette. $44, $45 range. That's not cheap, you know? That's not a cheap palette. It's like they were trying to do a hybrid between the baked eyeshadow formula and the Natasha Denona cream to powder formula. It's like they were trying to smush those two together, and it just didn't work. What you got was barely any pigment. The shades don't layer very well. You don't get a lot of depth or dimension, even from the dark shades, like the deeper shades. I kept trying to deepen up, and it was just not happening. It was like they were just like, no, I don't wanna. So yeah, that one was a bust. That has also been decluttered and has gone to a new home, and hopefully it's living its best life. But not with. Let's talk about cream bronzers, because I have two that I recently decluttered that I did not like. I did a ranking of my cream bronzers on my channel, I think maybe June of this year, and these were at the bottom, and I decluttered them in my recent declutter, and I don't regret it. The first one is the ABH Cream Bronzer in medium tan. It is orange. The formula is strange to me. I didn't love the formula, and then on top of that, the shade was orange, so I was like, yeah, that's a no for me. I know they've recently come out with new shades, but honestly, guys, I don't really care because I didn't like the formula, so it doesn't even matter to me that they've kind of thought, hey, maybe we shouldn't have just orange bronzers. Maybe we should put some neutrals in there and some, you know, maybe we should have a little bit of, you know, undertone diversity in the bronzers. I don't even care because the formula is whack to me. So, yeah. The other cream bronzer on the list is the Danielessa Myricks. I think it's called Power Cream Bronzer. That also was very orange, but less orange than the ABH. My issue with that cream bronzer was the formulation and the feel of it. I showed it in that bronzer ranking, and it's like tacky to the touch, it felt gummy. It felt weird. I didn't like the way it felt on my hands. I didn't like the way it felt on my face. It just was weird. And I couldn't bring myself to even try it after that because I was so, and I'm not someone who's like weirded out by textures generally, but that, like the idea of putting something that's gummy or tacky or like bleh on my face, I was just like, no. No. And again, the shade was not the biz for me. So it was just an all around no. The Kevyn Aucoin Sensual Skin Enhancer. Now, I will preface this by saying that I am talking about the original formulation. I know that they recently like reformulated it and they also changed the packaging and all that good stuff. I'm talking about the OG formulation. And at the time, it should have been a clue to me. Should have been a clue that something was up. But they had all the Sensual Skin Enhancers on sale. And I forget what it was like on a luxury beauty website, and I forget which one it was, but they had all the Kevyn Aucoin Sensual Skin Enhancers on sale. And I'd recently seen a makeup artist on Instagram using them, and he created this beautiful look, and I was like, oh, I want a beautiful look. So I bought two because I was like, I don't know what shade, but they're on sale and they're super cheap right now. So let me buy both shades and I'll figure it out. Well, the first one was too dark. The other one was okay, but just a tad too neutral. The problem with that is I could have made the one with just a tad too neutral work if the formula wasn't so full coverage. OMG, that formula is insanely pigmented. It's like stage makeup. And I know that it's a formulation that can be, you can use as concealer, you can use as foundation, you can mix it with some things and make it into like a skin serum or a skin tint. I get that, but that for me only works if the tone of the product is close enough to my skin tone. You know, I feel like with something that's just that tad bit off, it's too noticeable for such a full coverage product. And I just couldn't get it to work for me. I put it on and I felt like I was wearing a mask. I felt like I was just like, it's so heavy, and I'm hoping that the new formulation is a little bit more user-friendly. I think that formula would work well for makeup artists because I feel like a professional makeup artist would know how to manipulate that a little bit. They'd probably have more tones and, you know, more of the shade range. I had one that was just too dark, and even when mixed with the neutral one, it was still just too dark. I'm hoping that they have a bit more nuance in the undertones because I felt like both of them were very neutral, and one of them was supposed to be more warm and it was still very neutral. So I'm hoping that the formula, since it's marketed and sold to consumer makeup enthusiasts, I'm hoping that the formula is a bit more forgiving. But as the OG formula, I felt that was very much geared towards makeup artists who would need to use that type of makeup for things, not for like regular Joe Schmo me, you know. Estee Lauder Futurist, I think it's called Futurist Hydra Foundation, something like that. It's a Futurist foundation. It's the one that's in the little tube. I purchased this foundation twice. Once I purchased it in the, I think it's 31W, which is like my shade in the Double Wear, which I haven't used in years, but I was one of those people who wore Estee Lauder Double Wear, and I did enjoy it at the time. So I purchased it in that shade. It was just a tad warmer than 3W1 in Double Wear, but not too bad. My issue with that was that it oxidized in the tube and on my face. So I was like, okay, I'll get 3-in-1, which I think is like wheat something. So neutral, almost gray on me. Again, the issue was that I found that it oxidized in the tube, and it was very strange, and I didn't understand what was happening, but the product was like separating in the tube. And I figured out that it was probably the sunscreen, the SPF that is in that foundation formula. I felt that it was like they were separate from each other, and maybe if you shook it up it would be fine, but for me that turned me off because it just made me think that the formulation wasn't stable, because I've had other foundations that have SPF in them that don't do that, and it just looked gross, you know, like when you look at the tube and it looks all like weird. I wasn't interested in putting that on my face, so I wound up getting rid of both of them, and I didn't even give them away because I was so weirded out by the formulation. I wouldn't give that to someone, so I wound up tossing them. Think about that for a second. Think about a waste of money and how expensive Estee Lauder foundations are. I'm feeling kind of salty about that. Urban Decay Hydrating Skin Serum, I think it's what it's called. The one, Hydromaniac, that's what it's called. Hydromaniac, in the little tube with the blue and the gold, the little teal tube. That foundation made my skin look greasy. Not only was the shade range really whack because I had a really hard time finding a shade, and Sephora flat out told me they didn't even have a shade for me. They were like, I don't know, sis. I did this shade finder. They were like, nothing will work for you. It reminded me of when I went on eHarmony and did like the, this is what I'm looking for. And eHarmony came back and was like, that's too bad we have no one. That's basically what Sephora said to me. That's too bad we have no one. So I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll just guess. So I went on another website and I was like, I'll just guess because, you know, it was giving me a little bit more of like swatches. And I was like, okay, I'll go with this one. Wrong. Sephora was right. There was no shade for me in that range. It's either really warm or really neutral. I am neither of those things. I am neutral with slight yellow golden undertones. There was nothing for me in that range. And then on top of that, it made me look sweaty and greasy because it's so dewy. I can wear hydrating foundations, but that one is like, it's so dewy. That is for someone who has dry skin. I do not have dry skin. I have normal to oily skin, and I can wear hydrating things because sometimes it can kind of help balance out my skin and keep it from overproducing oil, all that good stuff. Whole nother conversation about skin. But that one just made me look like I had rubbed a piece of fried chicken all over my face. So I returned that one and I got my money back. But it wasn't so much a waste of money as it was a waste of time. Yeah. I have to talk about this. One of the first reviews I ever did on this channel was my review of the Danielessa Myricks Infinite Chrome Flakes. And it's my most viewed video on my channel to this day. So if you've watched it, thank you. But it is also probably my most controversial review because I talked about how the product performed over time on my eyes. This is the thing about the Infinite Chrome Flakes. I think they're nice. I think the formula is not the same in all the shades. I think I had 3 and I felt like it performed well in 2 of the tones, 2 of the shades, and not at all in one of the shades. So the one that I tried on and that sort of lifted off of my eye, kind of faded, it pulled up my eyeshadow. And keep in mind that this wasn't just a first impressions review. It was a first impressions review, but I went on to use these products multiple times because I really wanted to see if it was something I was doing wrong. I didn't think it was. I followed the instructions that came on the little promotion card because I had someone slide into my comments and saltily tell me that I was just doing it wrong. And I don't know why you would apply it like that anyway. You applied it over eyeshadow and you applied it with a brush. Well, Danielessa said you could apply it over shadow and you could apply it with a brush. She said you could apply it with a brush, you could apply it with your fingers, you could apply it with one of those little like, what do you call them? The little, you know, the things that you use to apply glitter with, the little tools that you can just pat. They're kind of like silicone, these little silicone tools. She gave all of those as options. She said you could apply it straight to the eye. You could apply it with powder shadow, cream shadow, liquid shadow. It was one of those multi-use products that you can use over everything. So you know what I did? I applied it over cream shadow, powder shadow, liquid shadow, and it didn't perform over any of them, that particular shade. The other shades performed okay. They did fine. Strobe Light, which is the one that I'm talking about, did not. And on top of that, I kind of left that one alone. And I recently was going through and deciding to declutter. And I picked that one up and I was going to declutter it. And I opened it up just to look at it and it was completely dried out. Now keep in mind, this is not my first rodeo with gel formulas and glitters and things like that. I know that you tighten them up really tight, you know, to the point where you can't even open them. All of them were tight. It took me some time to take the top off. That's how tight it was. So it wasn't that air was getting in or that I just had the top just loosely applied. No. I opened it up. I opened the little jar and it was like the product had completely evaporated. I was shocked. These are $25 a pop for these little jars. That's expensive for a single like gel product. It's not the most expensive as far as single thing, like single shadows and things like that, but it's pretty expensive. And I owned 3 of them. So add that up. You know, The other two, and I haven't even looked at those yet because I'm afraid to open them up because those are the ones that I was going to keep. This was one that I was decluttering and I wound up just having to throw it in the trash. So not only did it not perform well, but then it dried out. And so I just don't feel like I got my money's worth either way you slice it, you know? So yeah, that is my final product in my list of items I wasted my money on. That is the end of this little listicle rant. I don't think it was a rant. I don't feel like I ranted. I feel like I gave information, you know. I gave you my experience with each product. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to hit the like button. And also, guys, let me know in the comments down below, what are some of the products that you feel like you just wasted your money on? Complete, just like you took your money and you threw it out the window and it flew away and somebody caught it like 5 blocks down. Let me know in the comments down below. And again, if you enjoyed today's video, please be sure to hit the like button. Bye.